You want to walk with the crowd because the crowd makes you feel safe, because the noise of many voices drowns out the still, small voice that calls you to examine your soul. You want companions so that you will not have to hear the questions that rise up in the silence. But there are moments in a man's life, in a woman's life, when God strips away the crowd, not because he hates you, but because he loves you too much to leave you dependent on crutches that cannot save you. You must learn to walk alone, because there are paths you will be called to walk that no one else can walk for you, and there are truths you must face that no applause can soften. You have been taught to measure your life by numbers. How many stand with you? How many approve of you? How many applaud your decisions? But truth has never been decided by majority vote. The narrow path has never been crowded. If you read the history of men and women who truly walked with God, you will find long seasons of isolation, long nights where the only witness to their tears was heaven itself. They were not abandoned, they were being prepared. God does not shout over the noise of the world. He speaks to those who are willing to step away, to be still, to be alone, and to listen. You must learn to walk alone, because there comes a moment when borrowed convictions will fail you. You can live for a time on the faith of your parents, the passion of your friends, the traditions of your community, but when the fire comes, borrowed faith burns away like chaff. The question will not be who stood with you in the crowd, but who you stood before when the crowd disappeared. In that hour, you will discover whether your faith is a secondhand story or a living reality that has gripped your own heart. There is a loneliness that is destructive, born of pride, fear, and bitterness. But there is a solitude that is holy. It is the place where masks fall off because there is no one left to impress. It is the place where you stop managing your image and start dealing with your soul. Many of you fear being alone because you know what waits for you there: unresolved guilt, unconfessed sin, unanswered questions, a restlessness you have kept at bay with noise and activity. But running from that place will not save you. Only truth can set you free. And truth often meets us when there is no one else in the room. You must learn to walk alone because obedience is personal. No one can obey for you. No one can repent for you. No one can believe for you. You will not stand before God as part of a group, hidden in a crowd, shielded by association. You will stand alone, and the question will be whether you knew him or merely knew about him, whether you followed him or merely followed those who claimed to follow him. That reality should sober you. It should strip away the childish idea that spirituality is a social event rather than a personal surrender. The world tells you that independence is strength, but it lies. What it really offers you is isolation without purpose, freedom without direction, self-rule without truth. Learning to walk alone is not about becoming self-sufficient. It is about becoming God-dependent. There is a vast difference. The one leads to arrogance and despair, the other to humility and unshakable hope. When God removes the props you lean on, it is not so you will fall, but so you will learn to lean on him. Consider how easily you compromise when you fear standing alone, How quickly convictions soften when they cost you acceptance. How often truth is traded for comfort because you cannot bear the thought of being misunderstood. But courage is not forged in crowds. It is forged when you choose what is right while your knees are shaking and no one is cheering. If you cannot stand alone in the small decisions, you will collapse in the great tests. Learning to walk alone is learning to fear God more than you fear people. There will be moments when obedience isolates you, when you refuse to join in what everyone else celebrates, when you refuse to remain silent while others compromise, when you choose faithfulness over popularity, you will feel the distance grow. Do not be surprised by this. Do not interpret it as failure. It may be the clearest evidence that you are finally walking in truth. The path of righteousness has always been marked by footprints that diverge from the crowd. You must learn to walk alone because God often does his deepest work in hidden places. The world celebrates platforms, visibility, and recognition, but God forms character in obscurity. He teaches you to pray when no one hears you, to worship when no one watches you, to obey when no one rewards you. If your faith only functions when it is seen, it is not faith, it is performance. Learning to walk alone exposes whether you seek God himself or merely the benefits of being seen as godly. There is a frightening honesty that comes when you are alone. You cannot distract yourself with other people's failures. You cannot comfort yourself by comparison. You are confronted with who you truly are, not who you pretend to be. Many flee from this confrontation, but it is a mercy. It is better to face the truth now in the quiet than to be exposed later in judgment. Solitude is a gift to those who are willing to let it purify them. You must learn to walk alone because leadership in any form demands it. If you are called to influence others, you will first be called to stand apart. You cannot lead people to places you are unwilling to go yourself. You cannot call others to courage if you have never faced your own fear. The strength to stand publicly is born in private resolve. Those who cannot endure solitude will eventually be enslaved by the opinions of those they lead. Do not misunderstand this calling. Walking alone does not mean despising community. True community is precious, but it is not a substitute for personal conviction. In fact, the healthiest communities are formed by individuals who know how to stand on their own before God. When everyone is leaning on everyone else, the structure collapses. When each person is anchored deeply, the whole becomes strong. Learn to walk alone so that you can later walk together in truth. You must learn to walk alone because suffering is personal. When pain comes, when loss visits your door, when prayers seem to echo back unanswered, others may sympathize, but no one can carry that weight for you. In those valleys, shallow faith withers. Only a faith that has been tested in solitude will endure. If you have never learned to meet God alone, you will be tempted to abandon him when the crowd can no longer distract you from your grief. There is a refining fire in loneliness. It burns away illusions. It reveals whether your hope is rooted in circumstances or in something unchanging. Many discover too late that their joy was built on approval, success, or comfort. When those things are stripped away, they are left empty. But those who have learned to walk alone with God find that even in loss, they are not destroyed because their foundation does not depend on what can be taken from them. You must learn to walk alone because truth often confronts you before it comforts you. When God speaks, He does not always soothe. Sometimes He wounds in order to heal. He exposes sin, confronts motives, dismantles false security. If you are always surrounded by voices that affirm you without challenging you, you will mistake affirmation for love. Solitude allows the truth to do its work without interference. It gives you space to repent, to change, to be remade. Many of you are busy, endlessly busy, not because your life is full of purpose, but because you are avoiding stillness. Stillness scares you because it reveals what business conceals. But growth does not come from constant motion. It comes from intentional obedience. Learning to walk alone requires you to slow down, to examine your life, to ask hard questions, and to accept hard answers. That discipline is rare, and that is why maturity is rare. You must learn to walk alone because integrity is formed when no one is watching. Anyone can appear righteous in public. Anyone can say the right words when surrounded by the right people. But who are you when the door is closed, when the phone is silent, when there is no immediate consequence for compromise? Solitude reveals the true state of your heart. It shows whether your values are convictions or conveniences. There will be times when you feel forgotten, when obedience seems to lead only to obscurity. In those moments, you will be tempted to measure God's faithfulness by your circumstances. Resist that temptation. Faithfulness is not proven by ease, but by endurance. God's silence is not absence. Often, He is doing a work so deep that words would only distract you from it. Learning to walk alone teaches you to trust Him, even when you cannot trace Him. You must learn to walk alone because the call of God is specific. It is not a generic invitation that fits everyone the same way. What He asks of you may differ from what He asks of others. If you constantly compare your path to theirs, you will either grow proud or bitter. Solitude helps you discern your own calling without the noise of comparison. It teaches you to obey what you have been given rather than envying what others have received. There is a cost to walking alone, and you should not pretend otherwise. You may lose relationships that were built on compromise. You may be misunderstood, labeled, or dismissed. But ask yourself this: what is the cost of not walking alone when you must? What is the price of a life lived for approval rather than truth? In the end, one path leads to temporary discomfort and eternal reward, the other to temporary comfort and lasting regret. You must learn to walk alone because the voice of God is not democratic. It does not negotiate with your preferences. It commands, it calls, it confronts. When that voice speaks, you will either obey or you will look around to see who else is obeying first. If your obedience depends on consensus, it is not obedience at all. Solitude trains you to respond to God directly without waiting for permission from the crowd. The great danger is not that you will be alone, but that you will never be alone long enough to know who you truly serve. A life filled with constant affirmation can be spiritually deadly. It lulls you into thinking you are safe when you are merely surrounded. Learning to walk alone strips away that false security and replaces it with something far stronger, a conscience anchored in truth. You must learn to walk alone because eternity is real. This life is brief, and it will not end with a group evaluation. The excuses that sound convincing among friends will evaporate in the light of ultimate reality. When you stand before God, you will not be able to point to the crowd and say, "You followed them." You will answer for the light you were given and what you did with it. That awareness should drive you to seek a faith that can stand alone. Do not romanticize loneliness, but do not waste it either. When it comes, receive it as a teacher. Let it expose, correct, and strengthen you. Let it drive you to prayer rather than to distraction. Let it deepen your dependence on God rather than your resentment toward others. If you learn its lessons, solitude will not make you hard. It will make you holy. You must learn to walk alone because love itself demands it. To truly love God, you must choose Him even when that choice isolates you. Love that only exists when it is convenient is not love. It is transaction. Real love perseveres in absence, in silence, in cost. Walking alone is often the truest expression of love because it says that God Himself is enough even when nothing else remains. In the end, walking alone is not about isolation, self-importance, or spiritual heroics. It is about faithfulness. It is about choosing truth over comfort, obedience over approval, eternity over the moment. It is about standing firm when everything around you shifts because you have learned to stand before God when no one else was there, and you discovered that in that place you were never truly alone. God forms strength, integrity, and obedience in solitude because solitude removes the illusions that crowds create. When people surround you, it is easy to confuse agreement with truth, activity with devotion, and visibility with faithfulness. In isolation, those illusions collapse. There is no one to impress, no one to blame, no one to lean on for spiritual momentum. You are confronted with yourself as you truly are, not as you appear to be. That confrontation is not cruelty, it is mercy. A man who never faces himself will never be changed, and a person who is never stripped of false supports will never discover where true strength comes from. Strength is not forged in comfort or applause. It is formed when weakness is exposed and endurance is demanded. In solitude, you quickly learn how fragile you are. You discover how easily your resolve crumbles when encouragement disappears. You realize how dependent you have been on affirmation to keep moving forward. This realization can be terrifying, but it is also the beginning of real strength. Until you know how weak you are, you will never learn to rely on a strength greater than your own. Solitude presses you into that dependence. It leaves you no alternative but to seek help beyond yourself. Many people speak of strength as confidence, boldness, or assertiveness, but true strength is steadiness. It is the ability to remain faithful when emotions fluctuate, when circumstances deteriorate, and when no one is watching. Solitude trains this steadiness. When there is no external pressure to perform, your motivation is tested. Do you still pray when no one will hear about it? Do you still obey when obedience brings no recognition? Do you still stand firm when compromise would go unnoticed? These questions are answered not in public moments, but in quiet, lonely ones. Integrity is also born in solitude, because integrity is who you are when no one is present to hold you accountable. In crowds, behavior can be managed. Words can be chosen carefully. Actions can be shaped by expectation. But in isolation, the heart is revealed. What you pursue when you are alone shows what truly governs you. Solitude exposes double-mindedness, hidden sins, and divided loyalties that community can easily mask. This exposure is painful, but it is necessary. Integrity cannot be added to a life. It must be uncovered and refined. There is a temptation to believe that integrity is proven by public reputation, but reputation and integrity are not the same. Reputation is what people think you are. Integrity is what you are before God. Solitude forces that distinction into the open. Without witnesses, you cannot perform righteousness. Without observers, you cannot rely on image. You either live consistently with what you profess, or you quietly abandon it. This is why solitude is such a severe teacher. It does not allow self-deception to survive for long. Obedience, more than anything, is shaped in solitude because obedience is a response, not a performance. True obedience flows from hearing and submitting, not from being seen. When commands confront your preferences, when faithfulness costs comfort, when the path ahead feels unclear and unsupported, obedience becomes costly. In those moments, the presence or absence of a crowd determines whether obedience is genuine or conditional. Solitude removes the safety net of shared responsibility. You cannot hide behind collective obedience. The choice is yours alone. Many people obey selectively. They obey when it aligns with their desires, when it earns approval, or when it fits neatly into their plans. Solitude dismantles selective obedience. It brings you face to face with commands that do not benefit you immediately, directions that feel unreasonable, and truths that confront your pride. In isolation, excuses lose their power. There is no one to convince, no one to argue with, no one to distract you from the simple question of whether you will submit or not. Strength, integrity, and obedience grow slowly, and solitude provides the time necessary for that growth. Crowds demand immediacy. They reward quick results and visible progress. Solitude, by contrast, works beneath the surface. It allows patience to develop. It teaches you to endure without constant reassurance. It stretches your faith over long periods of apparent silence. This slow process is frustrating for those who want instant confirmation, but it produces something far more valuable than quick success depth. There is a refining quality to solitude that cannot be replicated elsewhere. Like heat applied to metal, it reveals impurities and hardens what remains. Impatience rises to the surface. Pride shows itself. Fear becomes unmistakable. These are not signs of failure. They are signs that refinement is taking place. Without solitude, these things often remain hidden, influencing decisions from the shadows. When they are exposed, they can be addressed, confessed, and corrected. Solitude also teaches discernment. When you are constantly surrounded by opinions, advice, and commentary, it becomes difficult to distinguish truth from noise. You begin to confuse popularity with correctness and consensus with wisdom. In isolation, those voices fade, and you are forced to wrestle with truth directly. This wrestling sharpens discernment. It teaches you to weigh convictions carefully rather than adopting them reflexively. It produces a faith that is thoughtful, tested, and resilient. Another work solitude accomplishes is humility. Nothing humbles a person like realizing how dependent they are when stripped of support. In isolation, you recognize how much of your confidence was borrowed from circumstances and how much of your courage depended on reinforcement. This realization dismantles self-sufficiency. It replaces arrogance with gratitude and presumption with reverence. Humility formed this way is not performative. It is quiet, steady, and genuine. Solitude also exposes motivations. Why do you serve? Why do you speak? Why do you pursue spiritual things at all? When there is no audience, motives lose their camouflage. If your drive was recognition, it will fade. If your commitment was conditional, it will weaken. But if your desire is sincere, solitude will deepen it. What survives isolation is what is real. Everything else eventually falls away. Strength formed in solitude is not loud. It does not announce itself or demand attention. It shows itself in endurance, in consistency, in faithfulness over time. Integrity shaped in solitude is not rigid or proud. It is sincere, transparent, and grounded. Obedience learned in solitude is not mechanical or forced. It is willing, thoughtful, and rooted in trust rather than fear. These qualities cannot be rushed, and they cannot be faked. There are seasons when solitude feels unbearable. Silence can feel like abandonment. Isolation can feel like rejection. In those moments, it is easy to assume that something has gone wrong. But often, those seasons are precisely when the most important work is being done. When external affirmation is removed, internal foundations are tested. Weak supports collapse so that stronger ones can be built. What feels like loss is often preparation. Solitude teaches perseverance because it removes the emotional highs that come from shared enthusiasm. When excitement fades and routine sets in, perseverance becomes necessary. You learn to continue not because it feels good, but because it is right. This kind of perseverance is essential for a life of obedience. Without it, commitment remains shallow and temporary. Solitude strengthens this perseverance by forcing you to confront boredom, discouragement, and doubt without escape. Integrity refined in solitude becomes consistency across contexts. You are the same person in private as you are in public. Your values do not shift with your audience. Your convictions do not weaken when they are inconvenient. This consistency is rare because it is costly. It requires saying no when no one would know if you said yes. It requires faithfulness when there is no immediate reward. Solitude is where this consistency is tested and strengthened. Obedience shaped in solitude becomes unconditional. You stop asking what obedience will cost you socially and start asking whether it is right. You stop calculating outcomes and start trusting direction. This shift is subtle but profound. It marks the difference between using obedience as a tool and embracing it as a posture. Solitude facilitates this shift by removing external incentives and consequences, leaving only the call itself. Many fear solitude because it feels unproductive. There is no visible progress to measure, no applause to confirm success, but productivity is not always visible. Roots grow in darkness. Foundations are laid underground. What is formed in solitude often becomes evident later, when pressure comes and collapse does not. Strength reveals itself under strain. Integrity reveals itself under temptation. Obedience reveals itself under cost. Solitude also prepares you for responsibility. Those who cannot stand alone cannot be trusted with influence. If your convictions depend on support, they will crumble under opposition. If your obedience depends on encouragement, it will falter under criticism. Solitude strengthens the inner life so that outer responsibilities do not overwhelm it. It ensures that when demands increase, foundations hold. There is also a tenderness formed in solitude. When you have faced your own weakness honestly, you become slower to judge others. When you have wrestled with doubt, you become more patient with questions. When you have endured silence, you become more compassionate toward those who are struggling. This tenderness is not softness, it is maturity. It grows naturally from time spent confronting reality without distraction. Strength, integrity, and obedience formed in solitude are not dramatic. They do not seek attention. They are often unnoticed until they are needed most. But when pressure comes, when temptation intensifies, when compromise is easy and faithfulness is costly, these qualities stand firm. They do not rely on adrenaline or approval. They have been tested in quiet places where no shortcuts were available. Solitude does not mean isolation from others forever. It means allowing seasons where inner formation takes precedence over external activity. Those seasons shape how you engage with others later. You return not dependent, not performative, not fragile, but grounded. You engage from conviction rather than insecurity. You contribute from strength rather than need. The greatest danger is not solitude itself, but resisting its work. When solitude is filled with distraction, its purpose is lost. When silence is avoided, formation is delayed. But when solitude is embraced honestly, it becomes a powerful instrument of transformation. It strips away what is false and strengthens what is true. It does not flatter. It does not rush. It does not compromise. In solitude, strength learns endurance, integrity learns honesty, and obedience learns trust. These lessons cannot be learned in noise. They require stillness, patience, and courage. They require facing discomfort rather than escaping it. They require staying present when everything in you wants to flee. This is why solitude is so difficult and so necessary, because what is formed there determines what will remain when everything else is shaken